Good morning, everyone. Again, I want to apologize for wearing the mask today, but I am still suffering. It'll be, I guess, a month of this um, because the pollen, my illness, it's not a good combination. It's just not a good combination. So I want to thank you all for being with me. This is going to be a, a kind of dramatic um, podcast today. Um, I'm going to talk to you today this weekend on the March 22nd. It'll mark the 84th commemoration of the death of my uncle, Sergeant Thomas Purnell Foster. Now, I never met my uncle because he was gunned down and murdered in the streets um, well before I was born, when my mother was just 10 years old. Um, and yet, Uncle Purnell is weaved into who I am. I heard story after story about him. His photograph was on full display in our home, and so his story, his legacy became part of our family lore. The play by August Wilson, A Soldier's Story, was triggering for my mother, and she couldn't remember. She was only 10, so she couldn't remember the details about where it was or how it was, but she said that so much of the storyline in A Soldier's Story was similar to what she knew and understood about the death of her brother, Purnell. And so I went about, and then after we saw the play, the movie came out, and it again was really triggering for my mother, really triggering. And she recalled all the trauma that her family went through. She talked about how Thurgood Marshall, um, as an attorney, was working with Grandma on the to try to get justice for um, my uncle. And I thought, well, there's got to be some memory of this in historical documents. And so I started looking, and I thought, well, maybe it's the Brownsville massacre that was the trigger point, because I was being a little bit too literal about the story. And I kept tracking and tracking, and I really couldn't find any trail of my Uncle Purnell. And then, believe it or not, he showed up in A History of Daisy Bates. So I'm reading, I'm just, casually reading about the background of Daisy and Elsie Bates and the Little Rock Nine, and whoa, there is a reference to my uncle, but he got lost in history because they changed History records him as Thomas B. Foster, not Sergeant Thomas P. Foster. And I thought about that, and to me, and y'all forgive me, I'm trying to look up on the internet and see if I can find an image of him. And I'm having a really hard time. But let me go ahead and tell you about his story. And if I can find an image, or if Mona, if you're watching, if you'll put a link to an image in for me, I'd appreciate it, sis. But let me tell you this story of my uncle. And it's the story of America. I like to think of it as the pendulum and the promise. This week marks the 84th year since my uncle, Pernell Foster, was killed in Little Rock, Arkansas. He was shot 5 times by a white police officer while lying on the ground unconscious. He was unarmed. He was in uniform. He was serving a country that refused to serve him back. His middle name was Pernell, though history tried to flatten him into an initial. But we say his name in full today because we are restoring what was taken. His dignity, his story, and his place in the long struggle for Black freedom in this country. Uncle Pernell was a member of the 92nd Engineers Battalion, stationed at Camp Joseph T. Robinson. On March 22nd, 1942, he intervened when military police were beating another Black soldier, Private Albert Glover, for being drunk. My uncle was a sergeant, and he had been tasked by the military to oversee and investigate complaints against Black soldiers at Fort Robinson. That was his job. The military police officers that were beating the soldier were below rank of my uncle. He gave them a lawful order not to stop beating Private Glover and to hand him over for him to return him to the base and carry out the enforcement of military discipline. They refused, and they drew their guns on him. And because he was insisting that he was acting within his authority that was granted to him allegedly by the United States Army, he was not afforded the respect that his rank required. Those military policemen, not only did they not respect his rank and carry out his orders, they began beating him along with two city police officers. And for that act of courage, by my uncle, which is not an act of courage. Okay, he was carrying out his lawful duties. Carrying out your responsibilities under the law should not require courage. It should only require commitment to the duty and honor and oath that you swore to. That's all it should. It shouldn't be an act of courage to go to work. But because he insisted on his dignity, on his carrying out the orders that he had under his authority, because he would refuse to allow his dignity to be crushed, they beat him. They beat him unconscious. The two military police, knowing if they put hands on him too much, that they'd get in trouble, they turned instead as 400 community members, black and white, surrounded the incident as they took him and beat him in an alley. They knocked the city police officer, Abner Hay, beat him well, let me say, one eyewitness says that my uncle was whooping that ass of Abner Hay, beating him. That what one-on-one, he didn't stand a chance. So then the rest of them ganged up on my uncle while the military police officer held a gun, the others at bay. The three of them beat him unconscious and left him on the ground. And then Officer Hay, Abner Hay, shot him on the ground in the chest 3 times, one time in the arm and one that went stray. 3 times in the chest, one in the arm, and one bullet that's unaccounted for. Then he had the damn audacity. I want you to understand this. He had the damn audacity to pull out a pack of cigarettes, pack it down, take it out, smoke, and blow the smoke down on the face of my uncle, who lay dead in the street. Eyewitnesses said he was riddled while lying on the ground. And Daisy Bates wrote these words in the Arkansas Press, calling his killing one of the most bestial murders in the annals of Little Rock tragedies. And you got to go and y'all know what Little Rock was like, okay? The federal government refused to act. The grand jury refused to indict, and they had the nerve to say, this was the grand jury report. I'm not lying to you. This is actual words from the grand jury report. I want to say, okay, that the grand jury, it was a vote of 19-4. And I am interested in what those 4 white men who had the courage. Now that was courage. There were 4 black white men who had the courage to say the case should be investigated. 4, I wonder what happened to them and their families, because as you know, grand jury membership is anonymous. But I'm sure there were repercussions for their courage. It was 19-4. And the grand jury stated, and I quote, "The matter has been investigated, considered, and ignored. The matter has been investigated, considered, and ignored. I want that to seep in. Doesn't that sound familiar? Daisy Bates witnessed this event. She took action by reporting it in the state press. She reported that my uncle was brutally murdered by an officer who clearly exceeded his authority and used unnecessary force because he had been questioned by a black man about how they were handling another black soldier under his authority. "25 witnesses testified before that grand jury, including 10. There were 25 witnesses, including 10 black witnesses. The jury said in their report that they cited the conflicting and inconsistent testimony of the witnesses as the reason they failed to indict Officer Hay." Sound familiar? I'm just asking. We had videotape of many of these incidents, but it was inconsistent, conflicting things. The community in Little Rock was outraged, and history records, you can look it up in the Arkansas Encyclopedia of Arkansas, that a lot of the civil rights gains that happened in Arkansas were catapulted from the death of my uncle. They hired the city hired 8 black police officers as a result of this murder of my uncle. But even that came with a familiar poison of American compromise, okay? So they were police officers, but they were while Abner Hay could, snatch up black folks, beat them unconscious, shoot them with 5 bullets, even when he didn't have authority to do so. These black officers were barred from touching white citizens. They were police officers, but they were denied pensions, and they were limited in their authority to enforce the law. So while you can consider that the blood of my uncle swung it forward a little bit in Little Rock, it was only within the cage of white supremacy, what we are now calling Christian nationalism. And that's what brings me here today. We are approaching the 250th anniversary of America. And we got to tell the truth. America has always been a pendulum swinging between its highest ideals, with liberty and justice for all, its highest ideals. All men are created equal, its highest ideals. America swings between these high ideals and its deepest betrayals to people who aspire to those ideals. It swings between the promise of liberty and the practice of racial control. Between the Declaration of Independence soaring language and the lived reality of Black Americans and others across this nation. My uncle's death sits squarely in that tension. In 1942, Black soldiers across the South were guarding German POWs who could eat at restaurants where the same Black soldiers were barred from entering. The white POW prisoners were allowed to sit in the custom cars of trains, in the passenger cars, while those Black soldiers were segregated into the cargo cars. They were sitting at the front of the bus as prisoners, while the soldiers who defended this nation were sitting at the back of the bus. I wrote an article back in 2014 about my uncle that had been triggered by the deaths of Mike Brown and Eric Garner. Triggered by the thought of Mike Brown lying in the street for 4 hours. They left my uncle in that alley until Black soldiers from Fort Robinson rolled in and rolled up and took him to the hospital. In the wake of Eric Garner's last words, "I can't breathe," in the wake of a nation pretending it didn't see what it saw, I realized that I was naming the same war on Black bodies that killed my uncle in 1942. The war against Black bodies, it didn't pause. It didn't soften. It didn't learn. Excuse me, it marched forward. Okay? It didn't soften. This is happening every day. It marched forward into the death of George Floyd beneath the knee and it's crossed over because when you allow this kind of brutality, when you allow this type of inhumanity and dehumanizing behavior to become inculcated into the system of injustice, when you can look away and you can investigate, consider, and ignore the outcomes when it's Black bodies, when it's brown bodies, it'll cross over because it won't take long. Now we are seeing the same type of brutality and immorality that killed my uncle in 1942, that killed Mike Brown, that killed Sonia, that killed George Floyd has now killed Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and the long list of names that this country is forcing us to memorize like scripture. How many people have died in ICE custody? Children, women, American citizens. History is already trying to erase their names, and it's already trying to forget that a black man named Keith Porter was killed by an ICE agent in Los Angeles at the beginning of the new year. Keith Porter, say his name. Keith Porter was killed by an ICE agent in Los Angeles on January 1st. His death barely made the news. It was swallowed up by the machinery of silence that always tries to erase state violence against Black people. But state violence under this regime is against all people. These names are not disconnected tragedies. These names are chapters in the same story, the same pattern, the same American design. And my uncle's killing in 1942 is part of that lineage, a reminder that the pendulum has swung back and forth, but the target remains the same. The demoralized, we're not demoralized people, I take that back, but the American design, the American system has always been built on the dehumanization of Black people. We are recorded in the census up until the 1870 census as 3/5 of a person. I was looking at a documentary the other day where they were talking to some segregationists and about integration in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and its passage and some of the civil disturbances and state violence against protesters during the early civil rights movement. And they were talking to this moderate Southerner, and they were asked, and the Black reporter asked him, he said, we just need to let this thing it takes time. We all can change our minds and become more progressive, and over time things will happen. And so the Black reporter said, well, if you don't consider Black Americans to be human, what do you consider them to be? And out of this man's mouth came, he considered us to be superior pets. It's on the internet, recently uploaded, so you ought to be able to find it because it just popped up in my feed. These people are not dead. And they pass that ridiculousness on. They consider women pets, appendages, baby making machines. Women don't even understand. This is Women's History Month, so I'm going to throw this in here before I get back to my point of the week. Women were either the property of their fathers or their husbands until 1972, when they were added to the Civil Rights Act. They couldn't own property. They couldn't even get a credit card. White women understand who you fighting for and who you fighting against. They couldn't get a credit card. Women didn't get the right to vote until the 20th century. And those suffragettes, womenists, and feminists that fought for this stuff, they are turning over in their graves as you all are just oblivious to what the SAVE Act is going to do to your rights. You will not be able to vote if you are a married woman who has taken your husband's name, because the name on your birth certificate and the name on your marriage license are different. And there's nothing in that bill that accounts for that. So if that act passes, you will not be able to vote. If you are a divorced woman who, because of poverty, didn't have the money to change your name back, because I don't know about where you live, but in North Carolina, it's $150 to change your name back just in the court fee. Or you kept your name so that your children, as a legacy for your children, your birth certificate and your marriage license and divorce papers don't mean diddly or squat. You will not be able to vote. You are elderly, over 80 years old, and they didn't have, and you're Black or Indigenous, or on the West Coast, you're Asian, or if you're Irish, and you weren't born in a hospital, all you have is a Bible with your name recorded in it, you will not be able to vote. Or if you registered to vote prior to the Help America Vote Act, and you haven't updated with your Social Security or birth certificate birthday, you will not be able to vote. I got a letter just before the primary that told me I needed to bring some proof of either my Social Security card or my birth certificate in order for me to vote in November. I got to update. You better check your registration. The pendulum is swinging, people. The target on our back is still there. But here's another truth I want to tell you, okay? This is the truth that keeps us fighting. the ones that keep us telling our stories and preserving our own histories. Black people have always pushed the pendulum towards justice. We have always insisted that America live up to its own words. We have always been the moral engine of this democracy. But this time, we're asking you to step up and protect yourselves. We are no longer going to be cannon fodder for your future. If it's not a shared future of prosperity, be clear there won't be none. I'm no longer going to sacrifice my children's future for your prosperity. My uncle, on March 22nd, 1942, he stepped up to protect another black soldier. Elsie and Daisy Bates, they stepped up and wrote the truth in the face of state power. Elsie and Daisy Bates remind me of the black journalists who have been torched, vilified, fired, sidelined, because they are speaking truth in the face of state power. I think about Melissa Harris Perry, Joy Reid, Roland Martin, Don Lemon, and Robinson. I think about all these black truth tellers that have been sidelined in the face of state power. But just like Elsie and Daisy Bates, these warriors, these truth tellers are telling our truth. They have not been silenced. In 1942, the Negro Citizens Committee demanded accountability, held their own Truth and Reconciliation hearings. They were not alone. There are NAACP chapters. There are Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People. There are Durham for All. There are organizations that are stepping up all across the country to protect and demand accountability from state power of black bodies and black communities. You and I must do our part by remembering our stories, the people in our families who stepped up. They may have just attended the marches. The mothers in those kitchens that made those sandwiches when we were hungry, how we met at church and had a potluck so everybody in the neighborhood could have something to eat, at least on Sunday. Everybody brought what they could and we ate what we had in shared community. It was mutual aid. It was mutual survival, and that's where we have to be today. We have to refuse to let the record tell a lie. We have to stand up like Representative Justin Peterson, who stood up in the Tennessee legislature and called out this ridiculous notion that we could teach as a history course a Bible that was written to support Christian nationalism and bring back a version of the Bible into public discourse. We have to refuse to let the record lie. We have to document our own history, preserve and protect that history, and tell it, and share it. So, on this 84th anniversary, I honor my uncle, Thomas Purnell Foster, not as a footnote, not as a casualty, but as a hero and a witness to Black patriotism, a witness to the gap between America's ideals of we the people in order to form a more perfect union, a witness to the American ideal that all men are created equal, a witness to the American ideal of liberty and justice for all, a witness to the ideal of freedom of speech and expression, of freedom of religion, of freedom to assemble, of freedom of press, of freedom to bring your redress of your grievances before the state powers, a witness to the cost, the bloody cost of Black patriotism, a witness to the unfinished work of justice. And as this nation approaches its 250th birthday, I say this: we cannot celebrate the promise without confronting the pendulum. We cannot honor the founding without honoring the fallen. And we cannot move forward without telling the truth about what was done to Black bodies in the name of order, in the name of law, and in the name of America. My uncle's story is part of that truth. My uncle's story is embedded in me. I am the living legacy of his history. I will not let it die. Today, as we carry forward, I also want to celebrate. I want to close us out with a celebration. There was a trial this week that I've been following, I guess, for 3 years. And it's out of Ohio. And it was a great victory for the people. Great victory for the people. For freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Now, this is the story of the rapper Afroman. And it starts with a rap he did back, I think, in 2022 called Mama's Lemon Pound Cake. It was hysterical, okay? So, he is known for, he had a big, like, breakout hit song, rap song called Because I Got High. This was back in 2000. And it was hysterical, okay? But he, back in, I guess, 2022, 2023, he was out on tour. And a bunch of Adams County, Ohio sheriffs, I have to put that Ohio on there because my daughter lives in Adams County, Colorado, and their spoof on this is hysterical. You got to watch it. But they broke into his house. They busted his gate down. They broke into his property. They broke his door. I mean, literally knocked his door out. And they had a warrant. The warrant alleged that he was a drug trafficker and a kidnapper, and so they were there to enforce this warrant. None of that was true, but I guess they had enough information to get a warrant. He then and they tore his house up. They confiscated $5,000, give or take. They counted it at the kitchen table. They wrote a number down on the things, on the receipt of what was stolen, and I mean what they had confiscated. And then all of a sudden they cut the feed to his indoor video. He had like Ring something, and they cut the feed to it. So he goes and he does this song called Mama's Lemon Pound Cake. And I'm going to see if I can load this up for you to see, because it is hysterical. And yeah, I can show it. Loads up. So give me a second. Give me a second, because I do want to do this.
The Adams County Sheriff kicked down my door. Then I heard the glass break. They found no kidnapping victims, just some lemon pound cake. Mama's lemon pound cake. It tastes so nice. down his gun and cut him a slice.
Of what? Of what?
Lemon pound cake, he wanna put down his glide. Lemon pound cake, trending on TikTok. Lemon pound cake, he's a family guy. Lemon pound cake, the munchies because he got high. Lemon pound cake, pound cake. He's a Adams County sheriff. He's hungry and he's big as hell. He was sniffing for weed. Then he smelled another smell.
What was that?
Mama's lemon pound cake. It tastes so nice. It made the sheriff wanna put down his gun and cut him a slice.
Of what? Of what?
Lemon pound cake. He wanna put down his glide. Lemon pound cake. Trending on TikTok. Lemon pound cake. He's a family guy. Lemon pound cake. The munchies because he got high. Lemon pound cake. Pound cake. He sees my cake and my porno mag call boom boom. Something happened to his camera on the way to the evidence room. Mama's lemon pound cake. It tastes so nice. Make the sheriff wanna put down his gun and cut him a slice.
Of what? Of what?
Lemon pound cake. He wanna put down his glide. Lemon pound cake. Trending on TikTok. Lemon pound cake. He's a family guy. Lemon pound cake. The munchies because he got high. Lemon pound cake. Pound cake.
Okay, people. So, Afroman did another one about can you fix my gate? Can you fix my door? So he had these two rap songs that use footage of the Adams County sheriffs breaking into his house with warrant, but breaking into his house, damaging his property, and they were just funny. 7 of these deputies sued him for defamation. Sued him for defamation. Now, in between the viral Lemon Pound Cake song and the trial, he discovered that the money returned to him was $400 short. So then he put out another video. Funny, all his videos are parody in the Weird Al kind of vein. You get a sense of it. Calling them thieves. He did one where he alleged, he parodied that one of them was a pedophile in the same way that, a minor was used. Some of the things he did were in bad taste, very bad taste, but they fell within freedom of expression and freedom of speech, because not defamation, because these were public officials, and the things that he parodied had some basis in the community. So it was a 3-day trial that went on. They tried to get the complainant tried to get him to talk about the harm, to acknowledge the harm that was done. And he was like, they caused that harm on themselves. He did not fall into the trap. He was like, they took my money, my $400 is missing. They have been accused of being thieves long before, in the public record, long before I did my parody. Everything that I did, there's public sentiment around it. He was brilliant. You need to go on YouTube and look at some clips from his testimony on the trial. But I want to close out this week in saying that we don't, Afro-Man protested. He used the power of comedy and parody to take down the Adams County Sheriff's Department and expose their corruption and their ineptitude. He didn't go to court. They took him. The irony is that he didn't take them to court. They took him to court because he did a parody song, Lemon Pound Cake. That song is hysterical. And so is the other one about You Broke My Gate. Those are funny. But those are the two. I want you to particularly watch those two. And how he took down the system, how he exposed the system in a joyful way. He got justice. So he is the living embodiment of doing justice brings joy and brings terror to the evil ones. This case expresses that perfectly. Perfectly. I want to close out by saying that we are still in a period of war. Not only does my uncle's death talk about, he was a soldier fighting in response to World War II. America was dragged into that war. We did not go in voluntarily entering into that war. We were attacked, and as a response to that attack, we joined war efforts. What is going on in Iran and in the Middle East is a voluntary act of bravado that is costing lives. It's not just costing lives in the Middle East, but it's also costing lives in Ukraine. It's costing lives here in America when you want to ask for $200 billion for a war of choice, when it would only take $30 billion to tighten up the safety net, provide health care to all America's affordable health care, to provide food security to millions of Americans. $30 billion would restore our safety net but you want 200 billion. That has already increased the cost by $40 a tank, an extra $40 a tank of gas. Thank God we're going into summer and spring. It's warming up. You have endangered the lives of our military. You have left no regard for their families that are here in the States. You have provided funding to our enemies to attack our allies. You are blaming our allies because you went and jumped Froggy and got caught, and now you want them to come and get in this mess with you? You didn't ask them up front, because they'd have told you to leave it alone. We are still in the season of Lent and Ramadan. Prayers for the people of the Middle East. Prayers for our sailors and soldiers and Marines who've been placed in harm's way. By a president who thinks they are idiots to serve. His words, not mine. Thank you for watching this week's Doing Justice Brings Joy.